Welcome everyone to another sensual episode of Everything is Fine. I'm your host, Jonathan Boudreau, also known as Great Canadian Guy. Joining me as always is my co-host, Dr. Nikita Doorga.
Hello.
So, Dr. Nikita Doorga, how was your week? What's up?
You know what? It's been a good week. I've finally gotten back to, streaming and doing things besides staring at medical books the entire day, which is nice. It feels like I'm functioning as a normal human being. How's your week, John?
Uneventful. I'm almost finished up Final Fantasy VII on streams, and I played through the entire Season 2 of Batman the Telltale series.
Cool.
Yeah, it's actually, pretty good. There are a few detractions, like a couple of the cliffhangers fell flat, but the rest of it was overall really good. An interesting interpretation of Gotham. It's like a more grounded, not want to say realistic because it's still comics, but more grounded interpretation of the world and the characters.
Nice. I've heard good things about that series. I really wanted to play it. I should get onto it.
Yeah, it's worth an experience. The second season even has some pretty significant... Well, I guess I don't know how significant it is, but it seems like pretty significant decisions to be made that can change the outcome of the game. Such as, it might be possible to make the Joker a vigilante instead of a villain.
Wait. That guy? How does he end up being a vigilante?
Well, part of the game... Well, the whole game takes place early in Batman's career before the Joker is a thing. In the first game, Bruce goes to an insane, to the mental ward, to Arkham Asylum, for a few days because of some shit. I'm not going to spoil it. And he meets a guy there named John Doe, who's named that because they don't know what his name is or where he came from or his history, but he's pallid. Just totally pale and has green hair. And he's a little bit off, but he really likes Bruce. He likes to cut up Bruce's jib, and he wants to be friends. And he helps Bruce escape.
That's actually cool. I want to see Joker before he became Joker. That's freaking awesome.
Are you playing anything else good?
I have started Life is Strange 2. You know what? I'm liking that. I thought I wouldn't like it because Life is Strange 1 was so good.
Yeah.
But you know what? This one doesn't have so much teenage angst that kind of I don't really get at this age. This one's kind of different. I like it. It's a different dynamic.
I like it. Life is Strange is a really fun game. But this isn't actually a video game podcast. This is a politics, news, science, medicine podcast. So let's talk about video games. A recent study indicated that the recently infamous pathological gaming problem, or gaming disorder, or however you want to describe it, might not be its own psychological pathology, but rather a symptom of other illnesses. So this kind of reminds me of the medical symptom of dementia, and how it is kind of its own illness, but it's not actually a diagnosis. It's a symptom of several different illnesses, like Alzheimer's or strokes, stuff like that.
Yeah. I know you always told me about how when we made the change to DSM-5, there were so many things that changed. And a lot of it is because of, studies that have shown things like this, where, when we thought something was a separate entity, it really wasn't. It was actually just a part of something else. Right.
I had to come to terms. For those of you who don't know me that well, I'm actually on the autism spectrum. And I had to come to terms with not being, quote-unquote, Asperger's anymore, because that's just not a diagnosis. And they were right to get rid of it, as uncomfortable as it made me at first. Because it really does create an arbitrary distinction between high-functioning autism and Asperger's. That there's no meaningful distinction other than rate of language development and general sociability.
Yeah. I think what interested me the most about this study was it happened in Seoul, South Korea, and I was doing a lot of researched the last few months about living in South Korea and what it's like and, the life there. And a lot of people were saying that there's a high level of stress. Like, I mean, the kids go to school up until nighttime. They basically go home to sleep. And then they come back. School, you have dinner there, you're studying, you work the entire day. Like, whether you're a young kid, you come home pretty late from school. Like, some people just kind of basically live at school, you could say. And when they were talking about the level of stress, and then you see this study come out, and a lot of people are saying that when they're really stressed, they go out and they play games. And they play more and more games because it helps them to calm down and get, just not be in that stressful environment anymore.
Yeah, it's really no different than people who get lost in exercise or in fantasy or movies or TV shows. It's just escapism. And it's not pathological escapism like addiction is what we're sort of learning, but rather is, like any of those others I mentioned, emblematic of an existing psychological problem, be it acute and environmental or chronic and like mental illness related.
It's the same, like if you look at it, a kid who's having, parents that are constantly fighting, they're not around, the kid, plays video games.
Yeah.
Kind of escape that fighting and that bad environment. Like, you see, the thing is, people were so quick to say that, oh, this person is just playing video games, it's pathological. They weren't looking outside the bubble of what could be the reason why this person spends all their time playing games.
It doesn't really follow the same pattern as other addictions, really. Like, it does insofar as, like, people who might have quote-unquote video game addiction, they think about playing games when they're not doing it, and they do other things just waiting for the opportunity to go and do it. Like, that's the way it is with gambling, with alcoholism, with drugs. But people that do those things do other things too, while they're doing them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like they step out for 10 minutes and they immediately are like, sweating and they're like, I need to play a video game. Like, it's not that kind of addiction.
No.
I've never.
Fun fact, I was diagnosed with video game addiction when I was 10. Yeah, I was
really
basically like I was always seemed like a grounding to me, but I know now that it wasn't. But I was barred from video games for a year, and yeah, it wasn't because I was addicted to video games. Really, I never really did buy that, even as I got older. It's because I didn't want to do all the other things people wanted me to do.
Exactly. And I feel like, especially back then, people saw it as a one-sided thing. Why isn't he outside playing with the friends and, playing basketball, playing sports, video games? This is weird. This is bad for him.
Hey, the thing is, I did do those things. Just not as much as they would have liked me to, or as much as some of the other kids.
You did those things and you were still diagnosed with addiction?
It's because I spent enough time, like, playing video games that it probably seemed pathological without taking into consideration things like, well, I wasn't diagnosed with depression, and I wouldn't find out that I was autistic until I was like 16.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Now, my mom did have a hunch, and she avoided ever getting me a diagnosis because she didn't want me to end up in special ed.
Yeah.
Because this was the 90s.
It was a different time.
Oh, yeah, like, the autistic kids would just be given a teacher's aid, and they'd have to do, like, remedial special ed shit, and then they wouldn't be able to go to college.
Wow. That's horrible.
I mean, if you wonder why people replaced the word retard with the term autistic to mean exactly the same thing, that's why. That's just kind of an assumption we draw. There's something wrong with your brain.
Wow. I have absolutely no words. But that's a sad fact of what the 90s was like. Nobody understood it. Nobody...
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even up to these, like, modern times, we still see people just immediately going for the label that, okay, this person has XYZ mental health problems. They're not going to be able to make it in life. They're not going to make it in the world. They're not going to make it here and there.
Yeah. And we've been wrong about it a lot.
Yeah.
Like, in the last 10 years, we've discovered people with Down syndrome are actually totally capable of living a functioning life. They've just got to be given the opportunities.
True. Very true.
Like, we've got fashion models.
We've even got some college graduates. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Like, totally possible. Like, are they going to have a harder time? Yes. Do they need additional help, like some kind of equity? Definitely.
They can do it.
That's okay.
They can still do it in their own time, at a different pace.
I never liked the rigidity of academia. Like, it feels almost implicitly ableist. Like, they spell out a number of accommodations they're willing to make depending on what problem you have, which seems fair. But really, the fact that those accommodations have to be made kind of implies an unnecessary rigidity to how academia, how testing is done.
Right. And, like, from my personal experience, like, so I went to an Indian medical college, as you know, right? Now, I was always an okay student. I had I balanced it out. I was never one to just, constantly memorize things. I would just read and go on. That was my life. And it was fine. I still had fun. I still enjoyed myself. Went to the Indian medical college and it was so rigid. Like, there was no room for you to not memorize things word for word according to a strict syllabus designed only, for people who mugged up the entire book to succeed, and people who described things differently, but they were still right. They were just treated like, you're dumb.
Right. We're getting really off topic of pathological gaming.
We really are.
Okay. Right. So academic stress, familial stress.
I mean, previously they thought it was just because, kids don't have self-control, which, that's true to an extent. Is it on the level of addiction? I don't know.
See, self-control is a lot harder to do when you're under a lot of psychological duress. People often take this individualistic idea of, like, personal responsibility and being constantly in self-control, but that wears on your willpower. And when your willpower is drained, you can't make yourself always do the best thing. You have to give in to your whims in order to just get by. Like, willpower isn't an endless resource.
Exactly.
And that's what recreation does, is it helps you rebuild your willpower.
Exactly. I wonder if it's also an issue of having the need to build, not just willpower, but confidence also. Because when you play a game, you're achieving things. Like, you might not be achieving much in life at the time. Maybe you just feel like nothing's going your way. And you feel kind of confident after playing a few levels of the game. You feel better, and it kind of it recharges you to go about your normal life.
Like, definitely. That's something that you do in clinical therapy. One of the approaches to getting somebody to build up their self-esteem is have them set short, easily obtainable goals, and then and have them achieve them, and then set new ones and achieve them. And over time, they kind of build up momentum, having achieved easy goals. And those goals can be as simple as shower 3 times in a week.
Yes, exactly.
For some people, that's hard.
It is, yes.
Or like, cook for yourself 5 days this week and stuff like that.
Yeah. Do anything involving self-care for the day. Something.
But the point is to set goals and achieve them. And I think you're onto something, that video games do that. People play video games with oftentimes very simple goals.
Yeah.
But they find them incredibly psychologically rewarding.
Yeah.
Like Harvest Moon. Harvest Moon is, for those of you not familiar, is a farming video game. if that sounds boring to you, then, like, you're not wrong. But it's one of the most fun and addictive experiences you can have. Just the idea that you can go out and do work and benefit directly from your own labor and get ahead under your own power. That feels like a fantasy when you're living under a system like ours that's exploitative of, like, your labor.
Right?
And doesn't give you much opportunity to actually improve yourself. Where you're in a constant struggle against other people in similar shitty situations for the tiny scraps of opportunity that you're offered.
See, exactly. I mean, I look back and I think about playing something like Age of Empires. It's like, I'm just this little kid. I can't really do much besides little kid things. But when I played that game, you're running an empire. You're creating a city, you're building things. The rest of your environment's quite dull in reality. But in that game, you feel like you're accomplishing something because people are thriving in that city. And then you get thinking, okay, maybe I can achieve things outside of gaming.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really easy to conclude, especially as, like, people who have mental illness or shitty environments like this study was suggesting, that, like, you can't accomplish things outside of the game, so you might as well just play the fucking game so you can feel less like a waste of space.
See, that's proper adulting. That's becoming an adult and realizing, yeah, you know what? I have limitations. It's okay. I'll play a game.
No kidding. That's one of the worst things our parents I don't know, but yeah, you're about this. You're not that much younger than me. Like, one of the things that our parents' generation did that really, I think, affected people was try to impart on us the idea that we can be anything.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that screwed us up.
I hate to break it to you, but all those kids who wanted to be astronauts, an astronaut is an engineer, pilot, football player, scientist. Can you do all of those things? Are you excellent at all of those things? Then you're not going to be a fucking astronaut. They've got to be physically very fit. They have to be skilled at engineering so they can take care of problems on the vessel. They need to be scientists, so there's a reason for them to fucking go in the first place.
It's not just anybody that ends up in space. That's the thing. Like, there's smart people that are operating the control system.
Right, well, there's smart people who are also really strong and, like, creative. Like, not everyone's got it in them to be an astronaut. I don't know if I felt crushed by it, but I think a lot of people did when they realized that they couldn't just be doctors and lawyers. And another problem, and this relates to classism, that menial jobs like labor, service industry, things like that aren't noble professions, and that there are things that, quote-unquote losers do. But, like...
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to get your fucking overpriced latte, Deborah, if the college girl wasn't working at Starbucks. Like, these jobs matter. And they're taken for granted.
Exactly.
And we treat them like shit.
Even on the kids, like, shows when you're a kid, they're like, I want to be a doctor. Okay.
Cool.
Does nobody want to talk about, maybe being a mailman or... something.
Or even staying in the same vein. It's like, I want to be a doctor. And then you get to grade 10 and it's like, I suck at biology. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, well, you're interested in medicine, though, right? Maybe you could end up being a registered nurse. No?
And that's also good.
I don't know, a pharmacist.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's good that most schools tend to have a school counselor to kind of guide people in that direction. But yeah, that whole happy-go-lucky attitude when we were kids, like, you can be anything. No, everybody has talents and everybody has things they can't do.
Right.
It's fine. It's fine.
And this isn't to say that it's impossible or that you shouldn't have lofty goals, but I'm worried that teaching kids from a young age that they can be anything might be internalized as they will.
Yeah. And then the crash.
Yeah.
The crash. When it doesn't happen, that's bad.
So yeah, pathological gaming, probably not actually its own thing. And if you're dealing with that, and I want you to be honest with yourself, if you spend like 4 hours a day playing video games and you're not like a streamer, ask yourself why you do that. And maybe talk to your doctor about it or a therapist and see if you could figure out a way to improve your life where you don't need to delve into fantasy for that long.
Sometimes even just having an honest conversation with yourself also helps. It's like, okay, but why do I do this? Just think about it. Just sit and think about it. Why does this happen?
So yeah, in conclusion, pathological gaming research indicates it's not really its own illness, but is rather symptomatic of one or several other acute or chronic issues. Alright, so switching gears, prominent child molester and rapist Jeremy Epstein was found dead in his cell awaiting trial. Now, why is that important news? Those of you who live under a rock might be asking. Well, this guy has been trafficking children for sexual exploitation for a long time now, and has been linked to an incredible, almost unfathomable number of very powerful people, including Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, the royal family, including Prince Andrew in particular, Alan Dershowitz, the law professor, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the daughter of the late press baron Robert Maxwell, who was, friends with him pretty openly. She may have actually been abused by him, being hired as a child for like an assistant position, but then having her perform, sexual massages on Epstein. But that's a rumor. We don't know if that's necessarily true. And then Leslie Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret, is connected to him after hiring him in 1991 to manage a campaign. So yeah, he's got a lot of influential people who have some sort of ties to his activities, including this infamous plane, personal jet, that he owned, that allegedly a lot of underage girls would be on with him and other people, and would just fly places. And people that are found in the flight logs for those include, like, Bill Clinton. A lot, like several times.
Wow.
So this guy just turning up dead
Prince
is
Andrew.
an eye raiser, is the thing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, I'd like to talk about this, and get what you, first I want to get your take. Like, what, as a South Africaner, looking at this madness from over there, what do you think? What do you take away from this?
First of all, when the internet was buzzing about this, all the conspiracy theories were just flying up into the news, and I'm just like, okay, that's fine. But amongst this was this really weird picture of Bill Clinton, John. And then as a South African, I struggle to understand American politics so much. But what fascinated me the most was, like, seeing pictures of Epstein, right? Pretty big size guy. He's 66. What people were fascinated by that really caught me off guard was he had a hyoid bone fracture, and people think when you hang yourself, you wouldn't fracture a bone located in your neck.
Right, you're talking about the autopsy findings.
Yep.
Right, so just to be clear, they found him in his cell at like 6 a.m, and he was dead, seemingly due to like hanging or strangulation. He looks like he tied something around his neck, like a bed sheet or what have you, and hung himself to whatever degree, or at least asphyxiated himself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like, we'll talk about some of the conspiracy theories that have come out around it, and then we'll discuss the facts surrounding it, and then give our takes. But the idea that he broke his hyoid bone, which is a bone in his neck, when he hanged or strangled himself, is not fucking unusual.
And the thing is, I think people are failing to understand. He didn't hang himself with a rope, right? It was his bed sheet,
yeah.
I think. Right. So, I think people were still picturing a rope which is much thinner than a bed sheet. A bed sheet would have been thick over the front of his neck and the back. Very possible that it would break his hyoid bone. The hyoid bone, if anyone's wondering, it's located in the front of the neck, just below the jaw. You know, it's very possible that a man who is that size would break that bone when gravity takes its course and the weight of his body starts bearing on his neck. And if he tied the knot typically, because I think typical is behind the neck, very likely he breaks the bone that's in the front.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the rope thing, is he didn't hang in the way that you would on gallows. Like, they didn't kick the chair out from under him and break his neck. Or he didn't do that to himself.
Exactly.
Or however you want to say it. Like, he hung himself from, like, a prison bed. Because there's nothing really to hang yourself off of in there other than the bed.
Yeah. There's no specific jail cell that has rope in it.
Yeah, it's unusual to have rope in prison. I would think. I've never been to prison. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but...
Haven't been there yet, but,
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the more people were getting into it, they weren't really understanding. I saw people commenting about, how typically you would see the rope marks on the neck, but you wouldn't here because bedsheet. It wouldn't be ligature rope marks. There's no knotted pattern on his neck to be expected.
Yeah.
And at that age, his bones aren't as strong as a young person, It's gonna fracture easily.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the hyoid bone was being so widely talked about.
I think because it becomes a kind of like the back and to the left thing with JFK's assassination, where people who don't know what they're talking about see it as evidence that what they want to be true or want to believe is true.
Right.
So,
welcome to the internet.
Yeah, welcome to the internet. Right. So first of all, let's talk about some of the conspiracy theories and then address what we think of them. So my favorite one and the most ridiculous one is, they swapped out a body double. Like, they brought a corpse in and they wheeled him out, and he's super still alive somewhere because he's a CIA asset. Or possibly a Jewish intelligence asset. That was also floated. There are a lot of assumptions
people watching
made
too many movies
in that one. Like, yeah, we saw the corpse, and maybe it didn't look exactly the way he looks when he's looking at a camera and holding his face in a certain way with his muscles tensed.
And also not choking and dying.
Right, and not immediately after choking to death, which might have affected the blood vessels in his face. Yeah, people didn't think that the corpse that came out looked like him in his mugshot. I don't think that's great evidence. Like, just because...
Yeah, and I'm not too sure how long it was before they discovered him.
I think...
Like, how long was he, dead for?
I don't know the time either, but there was a 3-hour period where it happened. So, presumably they will have wheeled him out a few hours after they found him. So probably less than 6.
Right. Yeah, a lot of swelling and bruising would happen. Like, it's... another thing is people see the movies on TV and things, and they're like, okay, when you hang, it's just a rope and nothing really happens. Your legs jiggle and the person dies. A lot of things happen when people get hanged, and they do not look the same as when they were alive. They'd be puffy. Like, I can understand maybe not looking like his normal self in the autopsy and the pictures, but kind of expect that.
Also, perfect muscle relaxation.
Yeah.
Because, like, he's not alive to emote.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that could affect the way that his face sits. Alright, let's move on to the next one that is somewhat related, but less absolutely absurd. The idea that he was murdered. That this was a murder arranged or perpetrated by one or more of the very wealthy and influential people that might have been fucking children in his plane, and that this investigation could directly implicate. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. That's not a conspiracy so broad and so complex that it doesn't make sense. This isn't an Illuminati-style conspiracy. But there isn't any evidence that did happen.
Yeah.
There's plenty of circumstantial evidence.
None of the cameras caught someone coming in. I mean, it's a prison, right? There's cameras everywhere. Like, there's guards everywhere. Everybody's monitored. There's surveillance. Unless, this person was so powerful, they could pay, the entire prison facility.
You wouldn't have to pay that many people. Like, a security guard on duty and then the one looking after the footage. You can give them each, like, $2,000 and they'd probably be happy to do it. Because the guy's a child molester.
Yeah.
Like,
and then maybe there'd be a cut in the footage.
Somebody would have, like, the means and the motive, I agree. But that doesn't mean they necessarily did it. In fact, there's no evidence that anybody did it. People keep floating names about who might have done it, but you don't have enough evidence to narrow it down to, like, even a person.
Yeah, I'm sure if they took it up to court or whatever, and they've checked the surveillance, maybe there's an obvious cut at that time. Maybe there's tampering of the footage. Then, okay, maybe I can sort of see that happening.
And that's what I'm getting at, is until more evidence is available, is presented, actual evidence of foul play, that's an assumption, and it doesn't pass Occam's razor.
Yeah. And wasn't he on suicide watch or something? So it's not, impossible to think that he killed himself, because there was something that I read somewhere that he was on suicide watch shortly before this happened.
Right. He supposedly tried to kill himself about a week before this, and he was kept on suicide watch. And then on the day of his death, his cellmate was moved out.
Right.
He was brought off of suicide watch like the day before, and then there were a series of unfortunate events or mishaps or whatever, and then he died. Because, like, there are some odd or disappointing things that happened leading up to it. Like, that prison, despite its reputation and its importance, is severely understaffed because it's underfunded.
Mm-hmm.
There were reports that some of the prison staff were working their 5th shift of overtime that day.
Jeez.
And supposedly one of them that was supposed to be checking on Epstein every 30 minutes fell asleep for 3 hours, which, not great, but also not necessarily malicious.
Yeah, I mean, I bet the morale amongst the staff is terrible under those conditions. I mean, a 3-hour nap, I can expect that. Not great, though, but I can expect.
Right. And then there's the suicide thing. Like,
yeah,
why would he commit suicide? There are some reasons. He's not I think he's pretty sure at this point he's never going back to the lifestyle he used to live. He got an incredible plea deal,
definitely.
like an unprecedented, almost laughably offensive deal in 2005 when he was first charged with child sex trafficking. I think he ended up pleading guilty to just human trafficking or something that didn't require him to register as a sex offender. And he got 13 months with work release on weekends or some fucking madness like that. And that's definitely him having a lot of power. That's him with his connections. I have no problem believing that.
Wow.
So, he wasn't going to get that kind of deal this time. And he wasn't going to be able to go back to the life he was living. And maybe he thought that if he did end up going to prison, someone would just murder him anyway. So why go through the whole process of being humiliated and dragging down people he might consider friends and living in prison when he could just end it?
Yeah. And it's an easy way to escape, too. If you think about it, you don't have to live there under those conditions anymore.
Absolutely.
You know what I was thinking of, too? Sometimes people do this to end up in some... They want to be in solitary confinement because they want to avoid the other cellmates and all the other prisoners that can be threatening to him. Because from what I've heard is sex offenders get treated the worst in prison. So I wonder if maybe he didn't completely think he would be successful in the suicide and maybe he'd get solitary confinement.
Well,
maybe he was attempting it for that.
I think we should draw a distinction between solitary confinement and, the special accommodations for someone under suicide watch. Solitary confinement is a kind of torture.
Right.
Where you're, alone in a padded room with no light and no interaction, and the only interaction you get is when somebody brings you food once a day. No one's gonna. No one's gonna. But then
I'm also thinking about what if he was doing that for his safety because of the way other prisoners treat sex offenders in jail? What if he wanted to just be away from people for safety reasons?
Perhaps.
I don't know if when you're on suicide watch, I think you still be allowed to go out for lunch. Maybe.
I really don't know.
Whenever it's the food times, it's kind of hard to tell because I don't really know the prison rules for these situations.
Yeah, the American prison is unique. I guess not completely unique, but a special kind of bullshit. It's deeply corrupt. It's heavily privatized. And to a degree, a part of me does believe that things like this do just happen in jail. Oops, somebody committed suicide. Yeah. That mob informer just happened to die. What do you fucking know? Yeah. So, from that perspective, I kind of see how this could, he really could have been murdered. I guess what I'm saying and what I'm going back to is there's still no evidence that he was. And I think it's irresponsible to conclude that he was without that evidence. Should you be skeptical? Yeah, I think so. Should this be looked into? Oh, yeah.
No, definitely. You need to look into this. This is a special kind of scenario that needs investigation, definitely. And further evidence is needed. But I feel like until that comes, people will still be reaching and reaching. And we're reaching without any facts.
Yeah. Absolutely. Totally agree. All right, so continuing the this trend of good and positive news. So Hong Kong has been dealing with some serious protests and some even more serious government suppression. So this, this only really came to North American and European, I'm going to assume, news rather recently, sort of highlighted by big confrontations and police tear gassing civilians and all that not great shit. But it really has been going on since about March. There's a bill that the Hong Kong legislature is working with Beijing on that would allow China to extradite fugitives from the city without judicial process. So some people might be a little confused, wait, Hong Kong, China, is it China? Why would they have to... Hong Kong is a Chinese territory, essentially. And they're not happy about it. They are under Chinese rule, effectively. And there's long been a philosophy of one nation, two systems, where Hong Kong is allowed to have its own, like, political and judicial structure while being a part of Chinese society.
So it's being controlled by China with a very minimal level of political independence, you say?
Yeah, that's kind of how it works in actual practice, is they don't really have much to do that China doesn't want them to. So pro-democracy, right. The pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, meaning moving towards a liberal democracy as opposed to the state capitalist system China uses, they've been railing against this since about March, because this is seen as an affront not only to, like, the rights of people living in Hong Kong, but the philosophy of one country, two systems concept that they've sort of been living under. And the concern is that
right.
the way this law is worded would allow China to extradite anyone they want, even on trumped-up charges, out of Hong Kong. And once they're in Beijing, there's really nothing they can do. Like,
they have no context there.
Not only that, but like China's not great on the human rights front. They're not as bad as they're often presented in North America in a lot of ways. Like, we might talk about that another day. But they're not great on the human rights, and they will have no problem using this to extradite liberal Democrats who they want to put in prison and just get them out of the way, so they're not challenging the status quo. And they see that as something that not only can happen, but will happen.
Yeah, I was told that this was going to be a peaceful protest, and then what I still don't understand how the police ended up becoming so chaotic in the situation when it was essentially, I guess, students and teachers attempting a peaceful protest.
So I think it was June 11th when the bill was supposed to have like a reading or something on the next day. People start gathering and protesting. And then on the day of whatever, I don't know enough about their particular politics, but whatever legislative thing was happening related to that bill, like tens of thousands of protesters showed up outside the government complex. They were hoping to block lawmakers from being able to even debate the bill. Like, they were taking direct action and doing civil disobedience, protesting. And a lot of them came prepared for what they thought the police would do. They came dressed in black, wearing face masks. They were ready. And sure enough, the police responded the way that they expected. Despite beginning peacefully, police called on the protesters to disperse, and when they didn't, they started using tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and beanbag shotguns in order to make them disperse.
I think a lot of those images are being used as like rallying cries, because I saw a few images of young people being shot with projectiles. And it's kind of fueling them more.
Yeah, like, it doesn't seem like they're willing to back down, and that's good. They need to stand their ground here.
Yeah.
This is what civil disobedience look like. And I think that the fact that it might seem so extreme to American or maybe British and Canadian onlookers really highlights how passive we've become and accustomed to the current order.
And I feel like the thing to note here is the violence was mostly on the part of the police in response to a peaceful protest. And the thing is, it wasn't that the main issue here is the way that they control the people in a way that they will not tolerate any sense of the people having an idea of how they want the country to be run.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's giving me good kind of apartheid vibes, which is that's kind of how it went. Like, and peaceful protests happened, but it turned to violence and bloodshed because of the police itself panicking over just the number of people.
Right, yeah. So the thing is, this is totally predictable. Because police, both there and here and where you live and anywhere else, to one degree or another, are just the extension of the government's monopoly on violence. And so, like, challenging that government, that power structure, it's not hard for them to want to stop you using their implement of violence. We've got this idea in our head that protests need to be peaceful, and that violence is de facto bad or wrong. But I'm often skeptical of that because I think pacifism is a tool of the powerful to keep the plebiscite, which is in greater number, from acting up against them. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
The thing is, things get done when there's action. Things get done when, unfortunately, I mean, it took a violent response like this to get it out there. But in a way, you do need this.
The French Revolution wasn't done through sit-ins.
Yeah, exactly. And the excuse that the government and the police kind of use at the time is, this is emerging terrorism. And that's because of their own fear that, okay, you know what, people are standing up against our government. I'm going to label this as an act of terrorism, and I'm going to attack, and I'm going to make them, fear my bullets and my actions, so that they know they're potentially causing terrorism. So I will attack them with violence, because that's what you do when you think of terrorism.
And that leads us to that
violence.
Old thing about, like, what's the difference between terrorists and freedom fighters is perspective.
Yeah.
And, like, I kind of disagree with that. I think there is an easy way to define terrorism. Well, not easy, but useful. And it's where the violence is directed. And I think the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, is a good example of both, the good and bad. Their actions against the occupying government and military and police of the British during their not really civil war, but their resistance to British occupation was freedom fighting. They weren't killing civilians, they were killing occupying forces. Now, when they started using car bombs and killing actual civilians, be them British or Irish or otherwise, that was terrorism.
Exactly. And I feel like, if anything, this entire protest represented to me anyway, that the government doesn't treat any of these people as humans, and they were going to attack them and display it. It's what the protesters wanted, it to be displayed that they are not being treated humanely and not being given their human rights. So I think this actually worked out for them.
Hopefully it does, yeah. Although there might be some more deaths involved. And certainly there have been a series of suspicious suicides of protesters.
Yeah. That's the sad part, like, the sacrifice that's needed for the change to make it, visible to people. For people to see that this isn't right. That's the sad part. That's the price you pay for any amount of change, with especially this level of government control.
And yeah, things have been escalating, and I don't think they're actually going to slow down at all.
Oh, definitely not.
I guess my main concern is for the protesters, because fuck the police, if I'm being honest. And when the police switch over from beanbag shotguns to riot shotguns, I'm worried about that.
When it ends up being actual firearms.
When the violence goes from potentially lethal to deliberately.
I mean, it's scary enough when it's projectiles. Yeah, it's so scary. It scared all of us seeing young people getting hit with projectiles. So the thought of this potentially becoming actual bloodshed, that's scary.
But at the same time, like you said, this is kind of it can have a positive aspect and effect. And it would be great if people in South Africa or the United States or England or Britain or even Canada, France France is actually pretty good for rioting. They have a good riot now and again. But like America or South Africa or whatever, to like, you can just mobilize.
Yo, all South Africa does is protest. We could even go to Hong Kong. Oh my God, John, every day in college we protest. That is all they do, and they're violent. South Africa doesn't do peaceful. If we got involved in Hong Kong, let me tell you, that situation would be solved in a day.
Then why does your government still have so much power and corruption? Why bet you killed them all and replaced them?
Because we're messed up. Even our citizens are messed up, John. John, let me tell you what it's like when I was in college in South Africa. I was in college here for 2 years. Every beginning of the semester, students protested, and it still happens every time. Every time it's feast time in the semester, there was protest, and it would be bad. Like tear gas. I was giving in my math homework and got shot with a freaking fire hose.
Holy shit.
And tear gassed. They're violent. The problem with South African protests is we don't organize it. We just go attack. We don't do the calm and plan it and say what our message is. We just go start slashing tires, burning things, and obviously we need to be tear gas because we start off violent for little things, and no one knows what we're fighting about because it's disorganized. The protesters start fighting each other in the protest. It's not even just the police attacking us. They were striking about fees in my college, and I remember, I'll never forget this day. I'm there with my friends, and we were praying for our lives because we couldn't get out of the college because now suddenly there were these racial slurs being thrown at us, and they're fighting for fees. Suddenly, I'm not going to say those words, but I'm those words. And they were like, you pay the fees, your race is the problem. And then suddenly everyone was just fighting. There's no organization in our protests. Like, we protest about the community workers, the sanitation workers that aren't getting paid enough. But how do we do it? By making a mess on the streets, throwing the trash, burning everything, and giving the sanitation workers more work to do.
Okay. Well, on that topic, why do you think there's so little organizing before protests in South Africa?
I think the problem is because the people that lead the protests have no clear direction, the crowd can't follow properly. We start off, okay, we'll follow maybe Malema, okay? He says there's corruption in the government. They're using our money. And he's right. They're using our tax money. They're buying mansions. And we'll be like, hey, we'll join him and we're going to protest. When we follow him, suddenly it turns into another race war. He's like, you are corrupt because you are Indian. And then suddenly now the Indians that were in the protest are getting mad. And they're like, okay, I don't like this anymore.
Okay.
And then everything becomes race in South Africa.
I was just going to say, it sounds like the country is still absolutely gripped by its racism.
Completely. If there's any issue you want to talk about in South Africa, John, we'll bring it to race. We'll bring everything to race.
It does sound like it's justified to bring race into most things, but I get the feeling you don't mean in like an academic and understanding way.
anything. John, you could be talking about building a space station in South Africa, for example, and they'll make it about race. They'd be like, okay, but give us back our land, you white scientist who wants to build a space station. That's just how South Africa rolls. And it's horrible. That's why it's terrible to see a situation like Hong Kong, where people are organized and doing a peaceful protest. Granted, they were prepared for this attack. They were dressed with masks.
They knew exactly what the police were going to do. They
knew.
They soul read them. Yeah.
They wanted that kind of violence from them so they can say, okay, this is how you treat us. Let's make it on media, that sort of thing. But it's kind of sad that I do know it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's going to be a battle. But at least they're more organized compared to South African protests.
Okay. So we should probably keep an eye on the Hong Kong protests because they're going to keep happening until this is dealt with. Because the bill has been suspended, but that's not enough for the protesters. They want it just done away with.
I wonder if this will bring about some changes in China too. I hope it does.
It would be nice, but this doesn't feel like it's going to get out of Hong Kong. It's been going on for a while now, and it hasn't spread.
And China has its roots thick and planted.
Yep. Definitely. Here's some of what was influencing the Hong Kong, or the Chinese police to call this terrorism, because at some point in July, police seized 2 kilograms of high explosives, a bunch of petrol bombs, corrosive liquids, weapons, metal poles. They were expected to be making IUDs.
Oh.
Right. But as we mentioned earlier, the use of weapons and violence like that isn't necessarily terrorism if they are using it against an oppressive or occupying force.
Yeah.
But at least as sort of a common nomenclature variation of terrorism to be argued about there.
I wonder if it can be counted as preparing for self-defense.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that all violence against the state is self-defense in a dictatorial society.
Right.
But that's philosophy we don't have the time to properly go over. Maybe we'll do a philosophy episode. That could be good.
That would be good.
We'll think about that. Maybe a supplemental philosophy episode on a Sunday we don't normally record. That won't require any research or anything.
Yeah, that would be good.
So yeah, like I said, we'll probably come back to this as things progress. I definitely am keeping an eye on it in my own time. So if anything comes up, we will go over it.
So, while we're on the topic of South Africa has been trying to implement an NHI, which is a National Health Insurance. We're trying to finance a system that will make sure that citizens of South Africa have access to basic health care, regardless of their ability to pay or their employment status. Sounds cool. How are we gonna do it?
I mean, taxes.
Pretty much. A lot of it is gonna be funded from taxes. There's about 4 or 5 different ways that they can, get the funding from taxes. Problem is, South Africa's not the most squeaky clean kind of country. We're kind of corrupt. So now the issues that are being brought forward are, money laundering is pretty rife with our government. Is this a scheme for money laundering that's being put out there? As much as we're on the topic lately of always having, solid evidence before reaching, pretty much it's a good, idea to shoot out there that this is a money laundering potential scheme, because that happens daily in our government.
Right, the historical precedent for this.
Yeah. So this is only going to be implemented maybe around 2026. Currently, how it works here is we have private companies giving us health insurance like Discovery, health, and it's very expensive if you're not employed in a company that would technically give you health insurance. It's if you're not employed, it is unbelievably expensive. Even to get the cheapest plan, which is like called the key care, it costs you way too much, like to even think about it. I mean, even when you're employed, it takes off a little bit of your salary, the benefits and everything. So I can see the need for national health insurance. I don't know why we haven't been thinking about this a long time ago. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of other smaller countries have this. But it's a good idea to implement it, I think, if we can do it honestly, and if it doesn't cost us an arm and a leg in our taxes. I think it's a good idea. It's a very good idea. Especially in a country where we're all pretty much dying of multiple sicknesses, we need this.
No kidding. Also, from like you brought up, your country isn't the smallest or poorest country that has universal health care.
Right.
That being said, your country is deeply corrupt. And so that's a hurdle. That might require its own legislative overhauls, like some sort of independent watchdog or transparency laws that make it harder to launder money. Also, maybe rename some of your councils, because the Council for Medical Schemes, that sounds pretty shady.
I know, right?
Yeah, like this quote, "We're working with the Council of Medical Schemes to ensure that every medical scheme pays for the same package." It's like...
President Ramaphosa rubs his hands menacingly, like, hey, the medical scheme. This is totally good for you. Don't worry, ignore that devastating evil music playing in the background. Yeah. Medical scheme.
So, there's that practical speed bump you need to get past. But beyond it just being a good idea, I don't know if you think the same way as I do, but I think that healthcare is a human right. I think that you should have the ability to get medical treatment.
100% agree with you. And it's funny because we have from school days, they promoted the human rights in South Africa. Everyone deserves a right to access to healthcare. Okay, cool. Not everyone can afford it. We don't care unless you have money.
But see, you just found I don't know if it's a dog whistle, but it's definitely a talking point. And it's a way that people can get around having to accept universal health care. You see this in American discourse a lot too, is access. Yeah. So everybody has access to medicine. You could just go to the hospital and you could get a surgery if you need it.
Yeah.
If you can't afford it, I mean, that's tough. But at the access, it's there.
Yeah, there's the key word. The key word there was access. And we were kids. We didn't fully understand it. You're like, oh, cool. So that means I can just go to the hospital, right? Just, get treatment. No. You can. You have access.
Yeah.
If you got money. You can use it.
Well, let me take out my hammer and sickle for a second. This is something that is almost is really definitive of liberalism. It's founded on the idea of freedom and justice and human rights for everybody. The problem is that liberal societies have a history and propensity to decide who people are, so that the everybody might not actually be everybody. And it's been so obvious in some instances, like in America with segregation, or like apartheid in South Africa. But there's also the classist version of that, where from this perspective, the poor are sort of not people. They don't have that right. They're poor.
They're the poor.
So, the poors, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is really just capitalism. That liberalism is intrinsically tied to capitalism doing its thing. This is predictable. The current society you live in has decided that the poor people aren't entitled to that human right.
Yep. It's a right as long as you have the wallet.
As long as you fit the definition we've laid out of what a people is.
Yeah, a people is someone who contributes to the country by making money for us and also able to pay us more.
Somebody who produces and contributes to capital.
Yeah, you're not people without money. No,
if you don't make money and you don't trade your labor to an employer, you're not people.
What is your function, you poor person? Well,
Master, what is my purpose? To accrue capital.
But I'm an amputee. Okay, you're useless. No health care.
That's another good point, is the surface level ableism there. Of if you're physically or psychologically or otherwise incapable of contributing to the level that's expected of you, then you're denied that humanity.
Brings me back to the previous podcast when you were the government sees people as resources and that's a problem. Yeah, because if you're not able to contribute, you're not a resource. Right. You don't deserve human rights.
Yeah, and I think you and I were sort of talking about different things. So we had a disagreement there, but you were saying that and you were right, that when building an economy, people are valuable resources. I was saying that I guess
in all other aspects, what you were saying is 100% right, though. The government seeing people as resources is the cause of many of the problems we have.
So this is supposed to take effect in 2026 is what they're saying. That's quite a ways off.
Yep. And many speed bumps will be hit along the way.
So I couldn't find a whole lot about this. I found lots of articles criticizing why it can't be done. Or if the government is capable of even organizing a thing.
A lot of the arguments are mainly that we don't have the funding. You kind of have proven that to me before multiple times, that smaller countries with less funding were able to accomplish this. South Africa's not that poor. The reason why it's difficult for us to accomplish it is because our funding gets thrown into an abyss and we don't know where it goes.
Yeah, that's not great.
It does. But okay.
Actually, let's take a look at some of the countries that have universal health care. Maybe this will put things into perspective. Let's see, starting in, Africa. Algeria has public health care. Botswana has public medical centers. 98% of health facilities in the country are run by the government. All citizens are entitled to be treated in public facilities free of charge. Although there is a nominal fee of $6.60 American. So,
Just that.
Egypt has a mixed system where people can get help at public hospitals and clinics free of charge, but have to pay out of pocket for private health care. Let's see. Ghana, in West Africa, has the National Health Insurance Scheme, which, again, work on your naming, guys, provide citizens with health insurance. It's tax-based and is dependent on your level of income. So the more you make, the more you pay into the system. Let's see, any more that are super damning? Rwanda has a universal health insurance system. Yeah.
No! Like the place where Hotel Rwanda happened, they get... come on, South Africa,
Rwanda
do better.
Has universal health care, ensuring all but 4% of the population. And it, much like Ghana, is income-based. However, people at the lowest level of income do not pay for the service. There's no tax or premium for them.
John, that hurt. That actually stung. That stung a little bit, not gonna lie.
Well, let's take a look at some other places. I'm not going to cover the obvious ones like Canada or Britain. Let's see, what's another country that people might be surprised? I mean, anybody who knows about South American politics would know that, like, Chile and Argentina and Brazil have universal health care.
Wait, Brazil, oh my, so Brazil, with all that poverty, is still doing better than South Africa. Come on, South Africa, what's wrong with us? What is wrong with us?
Yeah, Brazil's universal health system adopted in 1988. However, universalized and socialized healthcare had been available for years before that in some cities, as early as 1969. So yeah, Brazil has universal healthcare.
Wow.
This one's pretty well known, but Cuba has a national health system. I mean, they're a communist country. Of course they do.
Okay, yeah. Cuba, a lot of South African students go there to study medicine, and it's completely free. Like, they don't even have to buy books. Everything's paid for. Like, that is, of course, the college dorms are crap to live in, but free education. Oh,
you know what else is crap to live in? The apartments we had to rent living off campus.
Ugh.
Like, Cuba gets a super bad rep, especially in North America, because people are super ignorant of communism. They're not a perfect system. They've got problems. But, like, they have the most impressive medical infrastructure. Like, their medical research is ahead of everyone else. Mm-hmm. And it's because people can be doctors if they want to be doctors.
Yeah. That's why we ship our South African people there to study. The medical colleges there are quite superior. Like, people don't understand this, that when they hear Cuba, they think because it's kind of stuck in the 1950s, they think they wouldn't be able to do this. They're very intelligent with medicine. Let me tell you that.
They're not perfect. They're not an ideal socialist society, but they're a functioning one that's doing better than a lot of Westerners know or think.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else would be embarrassing? Asia. Not that Asia's embarrassing, but I'm going to try to find some places in Asia that people wouldn't...
He's trying to hurt us because we know South Africa can do better.
Oh, yeah, here we go. You meant...
This is the point.
Yeah, Macau. This is a small Chinese territory with a population of 660,000 people that has universal fucking healthcare, funded by taxes. That's it.
Truth bullets hitting me. It's truth bullets hitting me because South Africa could do so much better than it is doing.
Right. Now, it's worth noting that China went, like, backwards and is trying to fix what happened in the 90s when they privatized the healthcare system, and now they're trying to, like, re-establish national health plan. So I think they've got some kind of hybrid system in place, but I'm not an expert on China. Let's see. Taiwan has national health insurance. 99% coverage as of 2004.
Wow.
People have co-payments in some places of like $5 a visit. So like 50 Rand.
Wow. John,
yeah.
If I showed up at a hospital with 50 Rand, I'm telling you they're gonna beat me black and blue and tell me to go get out of there. I'll be more injured coming out of the hospital if I showed them 50 Rand for treatment. Oh, man.
And then, like, most of Europe. I'm not going to bother going over any European countries. I don't think any of them would be a surprise. Europe has a lot of wealth. Like, it's
Europe.
But yeah, it's a thing that can totally be done in South Africa if you guys can just curtail your political corruption and maybe just
stop stealing money and laundering it in weird medical schemes and actually make an NHI.
The national medical scheme is fucking great.
Imagine me reading that in the newspaper. The medical schemes. And we're gonna help you. Okay.
Semantics matters, folks.
This is why millennials in South Africa have all this anxiety.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the fact that your economy is falling apart and you have 30% unemployment.
Yeah, it's like, It's not, I feel like it's already fallen apart. Like, I don't even, falling is being kind, John, to the situation.
So the last thing we want to talk about today is a good old-fashioned Canadian political scandal. So, for anybody who's been following it, there have been accusations that the Trudeau government may have pressured then Attorney General and Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould to try to convince the Justice Department, who chose to turn down remediations with the construction company SNC-Lavalin out of Montreal, Quebec. Now, Lavalin was accused of bribing Saadi Gaddafi from Libya when he was visiting Canada in order to get preferential treatment for, like, business there. And when that came to light, they obviously were going to be held legally accountable. And the claim is that the Trudeau government asked their Attorney General and Justice Minister to pressure federal prosecutors to negotiate a deal under newly passed, actually, under, I think, C-74, a big old omnibus bill that they had refused to use since the lawsuit, or the lawsuit began before that. The accusation is that was an unethical use of government power and a conflict of interest breach. Anyway, a report came out that indicated, yep, that super was an ethics violation. And for those of you who haven't been keeping up, it's the second one Trudeau has been found guilty of since, like, 2015. The first one being going on an expensive vacation to some rich asshole's island, which was like...
I just love listening to, like, Canadian political drama. Like, compared to South African, you guys have nice drama. I want that drama.
It's boring as all hell. Like,
I want this kind of drama in my life.
Honestly, seeing American news all the time, we kind of feel the same way. But that doesn't mean we can ignore when this shit happens. Luckily, there's like 1 billion regulations, and so this bounced off of enough laws that there's really no way they could have gotten away with it.
But you know what? I gotta admire something. Like, even though this issue doesn't sound as terrible from a devastating, corrupt country like mine, the way you guys just nip it in the bud immediately, like, it fascinates me how, like, Canada doesn't tolerate any sort of corruption whatsoever.
I mean, yeah, we do. We've got corruption. And like we tolerate what? Some of it. Well, there were serious problems with the Harper administration and their, like, muzzling of climate scientists. Climate scientists had to submit their research to the government for approval before it could be published.
Right. Wow. Okay. Wow. Didn't expect that from Canada, but okay. Wow.
Yeah, we've got problems. Like, the Libs and the Conservatives are both crap, just to different degrees.
So to anyone who's listening to this right now, if you're having the same kind of moment I'm having, which is sitting in a shocked face that the golden boys, the golden child, Canada can make mistakes and have problems. Yeah, that's me. I'm just listening and thinking, wow.
Hey, you just got taken in by a smile. That's what happened.
Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna say the truth here. Trudeau's handsome as hell. Okay?
Oh yeah, he's hot.
He looks like that kind of cute, friendly dude that, you know, rides a skateboard into the government office. You know?
He's so cool and with it. He's so hip.
You know, he goes to all these cultural places. He's that dork that kind of dresses up in all the cultural clothes. Like, the only crime I could ever have pictured him committing was being a dork. But a cute dork. Like,
right. I mean, I think he is earnestly like that, and I think he's earnest about his general social progress and his ideas of inclusivity, but there are limits, and those limits seem to be drawn at the same place that most other liberal politicians are, which is what benefits, like, the capitalist class.
Right.
For instance, he has been, in some ways, at least performatively, very good about First Nations people. But he supported a pipeline that was going to go through their drinking water.
Oh, yeah. I remember you telling me about this. Huh.
Right. And he has a perfectly reasonable argument for why these pipelines are still important, even if we're moving away from fossil fuels. But that wasn't the only issue. It was also the autonomy of the First Nations that land was used by. So that's not great.
That is not great at all.
Right.
Dang.
So what they found...
Disappointing, though.
It's disappointing for a lot of people who, I guess, some of us have been disillusioned with him since very early. He ran on a platform partially of electoral reform. He wanted to move us away from first-past-the-post elections towards proportional representation, which is a more fair democratic system. But as soon as he got, not as soon as, but quickly after coming into office and realizing that they're riding high on public polls and will probably win the next election, just didn't do it. And you could argue that was as much the party being no, we could do it in the second term or whatever. But he is a leader of the party and he could have put his foot down. He chose to give up on that.
He just didn't fight the fight.
No.
Let it go.
And failure to do good is its own problem.
Yeah.
And it demonstrated that he doesn't have a whole lot of integrity. So, to the findings of the report that came out.
So you're saying he's just like every other politician in some ways? Dang,
yeah, he's another politician.
It hurts.
And for anyone listening...
The media represented him so perfectly.
And for anyone listening...
It
so
hurts.
Is every other member of parliament, party leader, or whatever, as much as you might like them. I think Jagmeet Singh is pretty good. He's a politician, and he's going to lie. Andrew Scheer, I wouldn't trust him as far as he could throw me. And I weigh over 300 pounds.
So much
Maxwell
pain.
Bernier is a giant bigot, and if you like him, I don't want you listening to my podcast. Rather, you could just eat my whole asshole.
Oh, man.
Anyway... so what they found is the evidence showed that there were many ways which Trudeau, either directly or through actions of those under his direction, sought to influence the Attorney General to discredit the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutors in order to benefit SNC-Lavalin in avoiding legal ramifications. And honestly, it goes a little deeper than that, because SNC-Lavalin was petitioning the government, the Trudeau government, to include this new... They were petitioning the government to include this in their big omnibus bill C-74 that would allow for remediation agreements between companies and the government. And once that was passed, they were petitioning for the federal prosecutors to agree to remediation instead of legal action. And they were like, nah, we're not going to do that. This started before that was even a thing. And so they found that Trudeau, and either directly, like they said, or through people directly under his influence, applied pressure to the Attorney General to influence the federal prosecutors and sort of massage them into being a little more amicable to the remediation agreement. So yeah, that's a big conflict of interest. Hey,
Trudeau was a real... sly, shrewd, political businessman. Never really thought of him as that. It's... wow.
Right, so his response to that, of course, was, quote, "I take full responsibility, the buck stops with the Prime Minister," end quote. Which sounds good, but also could just be him covering the ass of the other people who can't avoid taking flack for this. It's he is owning up to it. I don't know if that really makes a difference, especially in the public eye.
I mean, I guess in some ways, because of the way he's portrayed on media, he might kind of get some slack when he apologizes. It's like, oh, Trudeau made a mistake, but he's admitting to it. It's okay. I guess in some ways his image gets cleared, but that doesn't mean he gets let off the hook.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned earlier, this is actually his second ethics violation as Prime Minister. The other one was when he took
Yeah.
Christmas vacation on the private island of Aja Khan, which violated an act that prevents prime ministers from accepting, like, lavish gifts and stuff from, like, foreign nationals.
You see, we need that. South Africa needs that.
So yeah, this isn't a good look for him. The thing that bothers me the most coming out of this isn't so much that, politicians did a crooked thing, but that the leaders of the other parties are, like, really getting dramatic about this, and it's a bad look all around. I don't think that getting up and being like, Trudeau is a liar and a fiend, is a good approach to, like, courting new voters. Like, you could turn them away from Trudeau, but there's no guarantee they're going to come to you. And generally what that ends up happening is people voting against Trudeau, which means strategic voting, and that would mean a conservative government. So you get Jagmeet Singh going on TV and saying that there should be an RCMP investigation about it, and that it's unforgivable. And it's like, okay, cool. Save that for when you're debating him. Put him on the spot. Use it rhetorically in order to set yourself apart from him. I really don't like the way that this is being handled. And Scheer is doing the same shit, the conservative leader Scheer. For those who don't know, Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the New Democratic Party, our social democracy party.
Wait, did you say Singh?
Oh yeah, he's a Sikh.
Huh.
Yeah.
Representing. Nice.
Yep, Jagmeet Singh is the first Sikh leader of a political party in Canada. I generally like him. He's pretty good. He's not the best when it comes to putting his foot in his mouth sometimes, but I like him a hell of a lot better than I did their last leader, Mulcair. He was really snaky.
That's still so cool though that you guys have a Sikh leader in Canadian politics. I think that's so progressive though.
I mean, a little bit. It'd be interesting to see what, like, a hijab-wearing Muslim woman, how they would do as, like, the leader of a party.
Okay, yeah, that would also be interesting.
Canada's not as racist as, like, the States, but we're not perfect. We've got issues.
Yeah. It's a work in progress, but at least you're actively trying to improve it. I think that's pretty cool.
So, like, this is a disappointing thing. I don't expect anything else to come out of this until election time. I guess if it does, I'll be sure to bring it up on the podcast. Do you have anything else to add about it? Because I know you're pretty invested in Trudeau on a personal level.
By that, John means I think he's quite cute.
Yes, he gives her the vagina tingles.
He does. He gets my whole... He gets the parliament going down there.
He gets parliament going, yeah! He brings parliament to order.
You know what? But I feel like, personally for me, I don't want to be that person that blames the media, but I'm blaming the media even though I should have a way of just stop thinking in a naive manner and think for myself. The media portrayed Trudeau so differently to me that even a minor scandal that he could have right now, that just shakes every single belief I had. Like, he looks like that innocent, sweet, doing everything perfect president. You know, he's like the dream president for a person like me, okay? So, I don't know. I'm still trying to take in the news. I can't process it as well as I had hoped. And part of it might be because he's cute as hell. Okay? He's cute as But also, if you told me the president of Mexico did it and he's hot, okay? He's very hot. But he also looks like he can do a few corrupt deals, okay? He looks like he can do it.
Wow.
Trudeau doesn't look like that.
Wow! Is it because he's darker?
No! No, but he looks like a shrewd businessman. He's hot as hell, okay? He's a sexy president, don't get me wrong. But Trudeau looks like looks like he can't do anything to intimidate a business. Like, I don't understand how that face can intimidate any business. I'm failing to understand it. And I'm basing this solely on the purpose of his superficial appearance on media.
Yes. So you're basing your opinion on him exclusively on how he presents himself to you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sad, but you know what? A lot of us are probably thinking the same thing. People outside of Canada, Trudeau did that. No.
I actually don't know if that's too prevalent. I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion about it outside of Canadians.
Okay, maybe it's just because I think he's hot, John. But still, he looks so... But you know what? This is a lesson to me and to anyone who also thought that way. All politicians are shitheads in some way, okay?
Yes.
They're all gonna do something wrong.
Well, I think the two things to take away from this are that everyone is flawed and no one is perfect. And anyone who is part of the political establishment is going to be corrupted to some degree by it.
Yep. They all want their way. Yeah. In one way or another, they will get their way.
There are obvious differences in corruption. I guess we're talking about this now.
This one's less obvious corruption.
Well, it's pretty clear corruption.
Okay, it was obvious. It was obvious to you, okay, but to an outsider, it's like, Trudeau.
I was going to come at it from as much as the system might corrupt everybody, it's to a different degree. You do have some politicians, like in the States, Bernie Sanders, who's basically been exactly the same person since 1965 or whatever, and his ideas have been super consistent. They probably have changed a bit, and he's probably been affected by his involvement in the system, but he's been super resistant to it.
It's kind of almost like being in a sort of peer pressure environment where as much as you will resist, you can be the strongest willed person and you join politics, but there's going to be something that you don't resist, and that's going to end up being your downfall.
And it's called money.
Truth.
I mean, you say there's something that's going to be... how did you phrase that?
The downfall?
No, something was going to...
Now I'm trying to think what I said. I said that you don't... I don't know what I said. I said something.
Right, yeah, you said there's something that they won't be able to resist. That's what you said, yeah. And the thing they can't resist are these enormous corporations with huge wallets that shoot money out of their guns. Just this horrible, oppressive power structure. So yeah, it's kind of understandable why money's influence on politics is so corrupting. It's almost like it shouldn't be a factor and there should be laws against it. That'd be great.
And if you look at it, even American politics, it's not even just money these days. It's almost like it's fame and being a celebrity that gets, involved in.
I mean, there is some of that, and that cult of personality to whatever it is for people like Trump.
I mean, even Obama and Michelle was seen like the celebrity.
Yes. Oh yeah, Obama was very much.
But it was
the spectacle.
But it wasn't in a bad way for them. But then it turned out into this type of thing where I was kind of thinking most of the time, is this a celebrity? Yeah, it's like
Obama's
how
charisma.
How do you differentiate when to be a celebrity and a president?
I don't think the celebrity is really the problem. I think it's correlation with the people who the donor class contribute the most money to, because they think that they can win and uphold the ideas that they're paying them to uphold. A lot of people gave Obama a pass partially because he was the first black president and that meant something, and partially because he was extremely charismatic and well-spoken and he gave great speeches. But between giving those speeches, he was deporting more people than any other president and ramped up the use of drone strikes in Asia and the Middle East. Because of his actions, people in some places in Pakistan they fear a sunny day because when it's cloudy, the drones aren't out.
But it's fine because he did it while being cool and popular on TV, and people were fine with it.
See, yeah, his charisma was also a smokescreen for some bullshit. Was he as bad as Trump? Fuck no.
I know,
God,
like,
no.
It backfired on Hillary, the celebrity.
Yeah, but she also lacked charisma and substance. Yeah. Like, she sucked. Hillary sucked.
Aside from, like, 1 or 2 Ellen shows, she was a terrible
I never saw her on Ellen. I saw a few debates where she actually did fine, but, like, it wasn't the same.
I wonder if the problem is also, like, I always see people talking about things like Oprah should be president. I wonder if the problem is celebrities shouldn't be presidents. Like, someone who knows politics should be, president. Not the guy who was in charge of Celebrity Apprentice,
Now, if Oprah had a master's in economics and a double major in political science and history, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Have the qualifications. The problem is making people president because you think they were cool as a celebrity and you like their opinion.
And even then, what I just said was an elitist qualification. Contrary to that, it could just be that you've been a public servant, like either mayor and then congressperson and then senator for like 30 years. And yeah, maybe you've got the experience to be president.
Yeah, exactly. Have the experience and the qualifications. I don't think a celebrity that maybe says some things that I think are great opinions is enough to be.
Also, Oprah's super bad on almost everything. Please God, do not elect her to anything at all. She's responsible for Dr. Oz. Sweet, merciful crap, please no.
Ugh. Yeah, man, Dr. Oz.
I hate him.
That guy. Like, everything about that dude. And when they used to put it on TV and he'd do his annoying sex talks with Oprah, and I'm just like, ugh. This guy.
So, in conclusion, everybody wants to fuck our prime minister. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Alright, so I think we've just about reached the end of a podcast here.
And we ended with, everyone wants to sleep with Trudeau.
Yeah, basically. Before we go, do you want to go ahead and plug what you're doing?
I am Sergeant Currypants. If anybody wants to find me, it is SGT Currypants on Twitter. I'm also now on Twitch, the same name. And you can also find me on YouTube. Same name.
Perfect.
Yep.
And you can find her TikToks at Sergeant Currypants 420. You thought you could escape it.
Dang it! I tried.
You got so far. In the end, it didn't even matter. Yeah, so I'm Jonathan. You might know me as Great Canadian Guy. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Great Canadian Guy, where you'll find this podcast. So hopefully you were able to find the channel. You can also find me on Twitch for my live streams at twitch.tv/Great Canadian Guy, or on Twitter at GR8 Canadian Guy. All one word, but the way I normally spell it was taken because fuck me. Alright. But yeah, goodbye everybody.